Yeah, you won't fit in at all.
I just.
I will not be back.
Hi, Lori.
Well, Sally's one I always worry about. There she is. She's always late for school.
Did Jeff come in to audit the class today, did he?
Very good.
That is all.
Oh, okay.
I knew he had medical issues when he was trying to cancel.
I really don't. Wow, for this weekend? Oh, did it? Today? I didn't even look at it. No, well, last Thanksgiving festival, I had one on in the parade. You know, it was fun. It was always fun, honestly. I enjoyed participating in that. Good to see you.
Hi, buddy. Evening, sir.
Give it a minute.
See you in a minute.
Oh, it's not done yet. Well, climate change notwithstanding, we forget that there's always a curse.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
I'll see you.
How you doing?
I know.
Hi, Sally. Doing well.
Nice.
On Monday.
Incredible.
It's just so crazy.
What you drive by, it's big.
Everything like
It's just really cool.
it's Shelley's fault every time. I think I like this.
They got that huge stage.
Sit on the end here.
Be a great
He would really like it. Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. We'll go ahead and open up the formal city council study session and call it to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the back wall next to the agendas. This time we'll roll call for the formal city council study session.
8 council members are present, Mayor.
Okay, our item tonight is to receive a presentation by the Police Facility Design Group, Concepts for a New Police Communications Center Building. We are here today with Mr. James Estes, who represents Police Facilities Design Group. They have been working on the design for the new police station. I know we have also Chief Elliott here, as well as Shelley Hoserland with our communications department. So this has been a so far a city effort to kind of get us to this point, and we felt like it'd be a good time for him to come and give us an update on the design of the building and kind of where we're at this point. And so, Mr. Estes, if you want to come up and begin your presentation, your floor is yours. So, okay, go ahead, Travis. Oh, we got it. Okay, let's take a motion to receive the PowerPoint presentation. Councilman Supram.
Make a motion to receive.
Councilman Jensen.
Well, second.
Cast your votes to receive the presentation.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you all. I'm glad to be here. This feels a little bit familiar. I've been here before on a same but slightly different project, so I'm excited to be back. I will tell you, I'm really excited about this project as well. I want to introduce you a little bit to what we have been doing this evening, but I'm primarily here to answer any questions that you have. At the same time, I understand sometimes you have to kind of get your feet wet, review these things to really, questions may come later, and we'll always be available to ask any questions as they come up. So this is more of an introductory to the process and to where we are now. So with that, I'll go ahead and just kind of jump into this. Here we go. I'm always glad to know it's everybody, all kinds of technical equipment. It's not always just mine that has these little glitches. So just very, very briefly, for those of you that probably would not remember, I am James Estes. I'm President and Principal of Police Facility Design Group. Just very briefly about who we are. We've done this project type since 1978. My predecessor actually started this firm following a federal grant study, looked at policing all over the country and how it was changing and how the police facilities needed to evolve to meet the needs of modern police facilities. At the conclusion of that federal study, he was trained as an architect and he started his firm. My partner and I continued that, and to this day, we still do the same type of project. We've done over 300 projects in this type, and I think the important thing is, what does that really mean to all of you when you do 300 projects? Well, I think we don't just design based on our opinion that we just take out of left field. Our opinions are based on a long history of working on nothing but this project type and knowing the results of projects like this. So we plan based on standards, and I think when you plan based on standards, you bring credibility to a project, because it's not just about, well, what did the architect want to put into the project, or what did our department want to put into it? It's based on norms for police facilities that are built all over this country. And so we really wind up with a facility that is based on need and not want. I think those are some of the advantages. We certainly understand the details of the project. These are pretty complex building types. And as we go into the next phases, things like security and access control and keeping information safe and keeping evidence safe, those are all critical things. And it's the details that help us do that in a modern police facility. So the other thing is we bring expertise to the table, not to tell people, here's how you have to do it. We bring it to inform them, to empower the department and to empower all of you in this community to make good decisions for yourself. We tell you the strengths and weaknesses of all the decisions you're going to make, but ultimately you make those decisions for yourself. So this is the process that we've been going through for the past few months. We started by doing a program. And a program is essentially where we interact with the client, in this case, the police department, the communications department, and some city staff, and we start looking at what goes into this facility. Essentially, we kind of turn a blind eye to how we're going to meet the needs, and we just determine what are those needs based on function. What kind of functions does the department, what do they, how do they perform now? Who are the people and the things that go into the spaces that you have to create to allow them to do their job? So that's what a program is. Now, in the initial program, we determined that we had a primary building, that's the main core police facility, of just over 30,000 square feet. In addition to that, we have a fleet parking garage. And you may say, why a fleet parking garage? I would tell you that probably most of our clients, it's amazing how many of them want to protect their rolling stock now. And when you think of the dollar value of the equipment that goes into these vehicles, you understand why they want to get them out of the sun in the summer and the snow in the winter. Things like officers coming to and from the building, instead of leaving a car running to keep it warm in the winter and cool in the summer, they park inside a garage, and it just has a lot less wear and tear on the vehicle. And the clients that we work for, when you talk to them about what is the greatest benefits in their new facilities, half of them would tell you it's the parking garage. It's the ability to protect all of this expensive equipment that the department has and maintains. So the garage that you see there is a fleet garage. It's not a personal staff parking garage. It's really for the fleet vehicles, the ones that you and the taxpayers pay for. And we are trying to protect those. So once we determined that we had a 30,000 square foot building and 11,000 square foot parking facility, we started looking at how are we going to meet that. And we looked at a couple of different options at the very beginning. And the first one was a 2-story primary building. And with it, we had a surface level parking garage. So that 11,000 square foot parking garage was separate, but on grade at the first level, 2-story building sitting beside it. And I'm going to show you a couple of diagrams of why we made this selection. We did, whereupon the 2-story primary building with the basement level parking garage is the direction we decided was the best option to go forward with. And so in this scenario, the scenario we went forward with, we created that program of 30,000 square feet, the main building on 2 levels, and beneath it, at a basement level, is the fleet parking garage. Similar in size, it's just slightly bigger, but it's a little less expensive to build it in the basement versus above grade as a concrete or masonry parking garage. So before I show you a couple of diagrams as to the option we went with, which is the 2-story building with the basement level parking, I want to show you a couple of things here. And if you look at these, there's quite a few numbers on here, and you may want to look at those in more detail and kind of digest them. But if you look at the column on the left, that is the program that we developed. So in other words, we as the architects meeting with the client, the city, which primarily police department communications, we determined the needs that go into this building. Every detailed space was developed in a group interactive session with the architects and the client. And we determined that 29,000 square feet with the client. We also determined that we have a sally port, which is a place to bring detainees into the building safely and securely for everybody. It's 1,280 square feet. So when you're looking at that column, you see what we actually programmed, what we worked out. Sometimes when you start designing, things change, because a program is just a text document that says, here's how big each space should be. Sometimes if you're not careful with the design, the hallways and all the things that get added into the project can grow a project. And we want to avoid doing that, because square footage is the single biggest thing that adds cost to a project. So as we started designing, we have these two options, which is the center column and the column to the right. We have the basement level garage, and I'm really showing you this to show you a couple things. We're very close to our program numbers, which was important to us to not grow the building and add cost to it. So we're very close to the program numbers, but we're also showing it to you to show you how the costs actually work out. So we have the basement level garage and we have this surface level garage. And what you can see is in the end, the basement level garage is just slightly more dollars. And the reason it's slightly more in dollars is that basement parking garage is a little bit larger because it has to equal the footprint size of the first floor up above it structurally to support it. So it's just a little bit bigger than the surface, than a freestanding garage would have been. But it, again, as I said earlier, it's a little bit cheaper to build in that basement level. So the costs come down with that. But when you add up all the costs, we're very close to the program numbers. In fact, in most cases, in one case, we're a little bit under, and one we're just barely over. When you look at these total numbers, and I want to focus on the construction costs, which is the third line from the bottom. 16,358 was our program number. The basement garage underneath the building is 16,400, and we could have saved about $400,000 by building a freestanding building up on the surface level. But here's what happens, and you'll see this. I'm going to have to jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to come back to showing you the diagram of that, so we'll get back to that. The other thing I was wanting to do before I got into showing you a couple of these things is I wanted to make sure everybody understands cost today. If any of you built a home or were involved in a construction project pre-COVID, you might wonder, how are we spending as much money as we're spending today? The cost post-COVID versus pre-COVID has been almost double. In a lot of cases, in a lot of the parts of the country, it's a lot more than double. And so even here, we have a substantially higher cost pre-COVID versus post-COVID. So I wanted to show you a couple of examples. This was a project in Poplar Bluff, Missouri that bid in 2020, just right ahead of COVID. And at that time, these buildings were costing about $281 a square foot. This is a project in North Liberty, Iowa that we did, again, just a little bit before the impact of COVID. And it was $299 a square foot. Then when we start jumping to the post-COVID, a couple of years later, we start looking at these kinds of costs. And I'm showing you a project that we're involved with on the top, but I'm also showing you a couple of other projects that other architects are doing, because I want you to know it's not just us. It's kind of the nature of the project type and the post-COVID construction. But what you see is costs now, construction costs, are roughly $450 a square foot. In fact, a project close to where we were building one, Grain Valley, Missouri, was bidding for $556 a square foot a year ago. Now, I looked at that project, and it's kind of the proverbial Taj Mahal. So it's a little bit of an anomaly, a little bit of an outlier here. But we are still seeing that right now in this part of the country, costs are running in the $400 to $450 a square foot range. And, you know, we're probably still possibly a year from bidding. And so we have a contingency number built into our cost estimates for cost escalation. But today, these costs are kind of in that $400 to $500, $450 is kind of a middle range for that. So I did want to show you these pre and post-COVID numbers, because again, for people that haven't built any construction projects in the last couple of years, it's a bit of a shock. This is a project that we just recently bid in the Gulf Shores, Alabama, bid about 4 months ago, pushing $500 a square foot. Now it's a little bit higher because it's right on the coast, and it's got a lot of storm hardening because of the hurricanes there, but still it's in that $450 average range, a little bit more than that. Now I'm going to go back to what I started to talk about a little bit earlier. And this is the site plan that you see, and you see the big area of white is the primary building. That little smaller square to the center right is the Sally Port, where they bring detainees in and out of the building. You can see 8th Street at the top and North Main Street to the left side there. So you get a little bit of a picture here, and you see that right now on the surface, we have 23 and 19. So we have around 40 surface level parking spaces right there. You also see that there's a ramp going down. That goes down into the building, and we have 23 parking spaces in that area underneath the building. Again, those are kind of for the fleet vehicles to protect them. Officers coming in and out of the building all the time, they can go into that space. This back lot is for staff, and it is planned to be a secured fenced lot. We'll do an attractive fence on the Main Street side and the 8th Street side, but it is an enclosed, secure perimeter that gives access to the back side of the building. Now, what I want to show you is one of the things that really drove us to do this basement level parking is, you'll see right here. This is what happens when we put the basement parking in a surface level garage. Now, you still see that it says ramp down. There is a scenario, basement parking down there, because then our costs go up substantially more. I'm just doing this to show you how much surface level parking space we lose. And we lose not quite, but close to half of all of our total parking. I think with this surface level garage moved into this basement location, it increases our parking. And I think it's going to make the building so much more useful for growth for many, many years to come. So I think for an extra, and it's our estimates today, it's not hard numbers, but our estimates are that it is costing us about $400,000 more to put that garage in the basement. And part of that is because we have more site area that we can develop. So we're spending more on the site, and that's increasing the cost. If you have not taken a look at it, this is a look at the building. It's a little bit dark there. But this is the view from the building from the corner of 8th and Main. I think it's, I will tell you, our architects are like anybody. I mean, you go through your career and there's things you're really happy with, and there's things you think, well, I wish this would have been a little bit different. I'm thrilled with this building, the design of it, because I think it's going to be a really strong presence on this 8th and Main intersection. I just think it's a really good building. I think it will do a lot to enhance this whole idea of the downtown redevelopment. I think this could be a really good starting point for a lot of the things that you're working on doing down in that area. The other thing about this is I think the building looks very high quality, which it would be, although to us, high quality is really about function first. But we did everything we could to simplify the structure of this building to make it as low cost as we can. And while I think we did a good job of applying the aesthetic touches to the outside of the building, it's a very simple shaped building. It's largely a rectangle, which simplified our structure. And the basement and the first floor and the second floor all stack on top of each other. And that simplifies construction and makes costs lower. The other thing is our idea right now, and these are things that we have in the drawings, but we have to, we kind of move through a process of getting input from the city and the clients. But right now we have some areas where on the front, we're using kind of a simulated wood, which is the brown you see. It's actually metal, but it looks like wood, and brick. So in the areas closest to the entryway, we're using mostly brick in those areas and some glass. We do have some glass around the entry area because it really signifies the entrance to the space. But around the rest of the building, most of the walls of this building are all precast architectural concrete. And we can build things a lot cheaper using architectural precast. Nebraska, this area is a good place. There's a lot of precasters in this area, so it's a good material to use for the exterior. And in a law enforcement facility, it's a very hardened type of material, so it makes a good stout building. So I think we've done well for the community with regard to a building that is simple in a lot of ways structurally, but has a very attractive appearance. This is kind of from the 8th Street view, looking back towards Main Street. And we also know that the building is going to be visible from the bank and from military, a major artery. So we want the back side of the building to look nice as well. Now, we're probably not going to put as much money onto that side of the building because you're kind of looking across the bank and other things before you see this building. But we think the back side of the building, we don't want it to look just like an alley. So this is kind of the backside view, and you can kind of see the kind of gated area and the secured parking on the backside of the building. And with that, I will answer any questions that you have this evening, and we'll answer any questions you have as they come up as we go forward.
Right. Councilman Jensen.
I just asked about your program costs for the Sally Port were significantly lower than what the actual cost was. That just the square footage was decided it needed to be bigger?
No, it's just a simpler type of construction. It doesn't have as much technology. You're talking about the square footage cost of the Sally Port versus the main building?
Well, no, I'm talking about your program cost for the Sally Port compared to what it's showing up is quite a bit different. I'm sure a program cost of $268,000 where it's showing up is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was one area where we shrunk a lot of the building. The Sally Port, we did make a little bit bigger because we're actually, initially we weren't going to, but we're putting the department's AMRAP vehicle in that. So the Sally Port in the program was smaller square footage, but it's kind of, we saved in one area, but we did grow that area a little bit. And it makes a lot of sense to have it there.
Councilman Vaughn.
Maybe a question for Chief Elliott. How do you feel about the selection? Are you on board? You agree?
Jeff Elliott, Chief of Police. We've been involved in the design process all the way, and we are of the opinion, myself, and I'll speak for Shelley, whether she likes it or not, that this is the design that we're happy with. We don't believe it is in any way the Taj Mahal, which is kind of a joke about these big buildings that get built. We think it's what we need now. We believe that the city will continue to be able to use it for decades to come. So we're very happy. And one other thing I'd like to point out is the parking. I know there's a lot of talk about the parking spacings in the police department currently is a major issue. And that is one of the reasons that we push to expand that parking and that he offered the basement because we currently don't have enough parking. It's a big complaint from the officers and the dispatchers. And so that's a big issue.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilman Sukum.
Yeah, I was curious about the basement parking. Is it possible to do that in this area? I mean, given our water table, soil?
Well, our initial knowledge of it is that we won't have an issue with the water table. But given that, it's relatively easy to remedy water table problems when you do run into them. As of this moment, we haven't done soil boring conditions.
That was kind of the question I was going to next.
Actually doing the geotechnical.
That'd be the next thing you'd probably.
Yeah, we actually address that in next steps, which will be coming up fairly soon. We would we're ready now. We're right at the point where once we have a design that's solidified, we can mark on the survey exactly where we want the drillings to occur and how deep. We'll probably have a building that'll have to be removed first. So we'll have discussions about raising the structure that is there where we want to do the soil borings.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from the council at this point? So can you talk a little bit about next steps through the process, please?
And before I do have this other slide here. That I think these are important for you as a community to know. These are the things that we see that make these projects beneficial. And usually when you talk to a community about doing capital improvement projects, they want to know why. What's the ramifications if we don't, and what's the benefit if we do? And these are the benefits that we think you'll see. We think it will definitely maximize operational efficiency. It just makes it easier to conduct an interview, to conduct in-service training, to have the space where the officers can do all of that, where they can meet with the citizen that comes into the building, where they can separate a perpetrator from a victim or a witness in a building that has sufficient space to do that, like sufficient interview rooms. It definitely improves skills in in-service training. One of the things we find is a lot of departments have to go with less in-service training than they would like to because they just simply don't have the space to do all the types of things they want to do. Defensive tactics training or classroom type training. Usually what we see is when you have decent training facilities and we have kind of a multi-use space in this building that can be used for a variety in-service training. What we find is that if you are a department that has a space to handle this training, you'll have outside agencies that will want to train with you. And sometimes what that means is they will bring one of their staff who is certified or an expert in a certain area and train all of the departments on a certain subject. And so what we find is when you have these facilities, in-service training occurs just all the time. And obviously, when you have a department that is in constant training, ongoing training, you're going to have a better staff out there on the street, and it's going to reduce the liability to the city and to the department. Increased safety and security means how we separate. We want the public to be able to get into the building, but we want to be able to control the contact with the civilians in the building and even with the officers and staff. We want to monitor a lot of the things that go on because oftentimes you never know when you're meeting with somebody that is hostile. We're living in such a litigious society that we have to, as police officers, document so many interactions that we have. Most of the time we never need that documentation, but we see all too often in the news that we do. And so we'll have all of these aspects in the newly designed building, and it'll increase the safety and security of not only the officers, but the people that come into the facility as well. Gives you the chance through some of these multi-use spaces to have citizens police academies and neighborhood watch groups, meet with the police to kind of create that community interaction and enhance the interaction between the public and the staff. And here's some of the things we know for an absolute fact. When a community has a new or newly constructed facilities or facilities that have been brought up to modern standards, it greatly increases retention of the officers that have invested a lot of training in, and it makes recruitment easier. And today, recruitment is getting so difficult in law enforcement that anything that you can do to improve that is highly beneficial. I think facilities are as important as the squad cars that you put the officers on the street in. And if you sent them out in a vehicle that didn't run half the time and the lights and sirens didn't work and a wheel fell off regularly, they might think a little bit less. They might think, well, maybe I'll go look someplace else to apply my wares. So the building is equally as important. And then I think the other thing is this, is when we think about people that move into a community, they move into a community for quality of life, good schools, good streets, good sewers, good jobs, good housing. But I don't think there's anything more important today than safety. You have a community that is a safe community, and that's of such value in this country today. And the people that deliver those safety services largely our law enforcement departments, our fire departments, having the facilities to allow them to do the best job they can, I think enhances the whole quality of life in a community. So here are the next steps in the process. The next thing we have actually complete. Now we may still be getting a little bit of feedback, but we've been getting good feedback through this whole process so far from the police department. They've given us changes and revisions, and we've done that. They've made some concessions to save square footage in one area and thus money, and add a little bit in another area. So we've worked through most everything, and I think the building's design is pretty well solidified. That's not to say there won't be small changes, and it's certainly not to say there can't be any changes. There can be. It's a whole lot easier making changes on paper than once you actually start construction. So we're never through. We're never through. It's an evolutionary process, but we have kind of solidified the design of the building, and now we'll go into the details. And when I mean the details, we talk about outlets on the wall and power and phones and data, and where video cameras monitor the building, and how door and access controls allow access in the building. We go into every single detail. What's on the backup generator? Who controls the thermostats? Every little detail. And we do that by having meetings with the department to go through all of that. Now, we kind of have an understanding of how these buildings go together, so we'll guide them through that process. But we don't want to just put something down on paper and call it good. We want their input and their thinking into it, and the chief to go back to his department, let them look at the drawings and get a lot of good feedback. So that is about the very next thing we will do is have these departmental meetings with us, the architects, to look at all the details that go into the project. We're also going to be very soon evaluating construction delivery methods, whether using a construction manager in one of its various forms, or just designing the building and then bidding it under a competitive method. Those are things that we talk through with the city. The city decides the methods that they want to utilize. So we'll be having those in depth to really determine exactly what direction the city wants to go with the construction delivery method. That's coming up very shortly, and that process would get underway very soon. And then finalizing the site survey, which now that we have the schematic design, the building kind of solidified, we'll get all the details in a site survey that have not already been given to us by the city. And as soon as we can get access onto the site and in the places we need, we want to do soil borings so we can start looking at, the compaction of the soil, what kind of footings and foundations we need. And then the other thing we'll do is once we get a little bit of feedback from everybody, make sure we're on track, everybody likes the project at this completion of the schematic design phase, we'll start looking at getting codes and the regulatory agencies involved to get their thoughts on everything from planning and zoning to codes, and have a sit down with them, or sometimes it's in phone conversations, Zoom meetings, where we start looking at the details. We design the building to codes, obviously, but we still go through that process of evaluation with the codes officials, because it's not always black and white. There's gray areas, and we need to make sure that we're all on the same page. So codes and regulatory will be some of the next things that we will be doing. These are all the things that occur in what we call the design development phase, where we're really we're designing the details that go into the building, room finishes, all of those types. And once we get all of that established and approved by the departments, the city, the next phase would be to actually take all these design drawings and turn them into biddable documents that the contractor can actually put together bid from. So those detailed sets of blueprints that everybody's familiar with. Then we go to the bidding, and then finally we get to the construction, the fun part.
Well, thank you, Mr. Estes, for coming and sharing this presentation today. I'll definitely second the look of the building. It's a beautiful design at this point, and appreciate Chief Elliott and Shelley Hilserlin for their work so far in the design and all the city. And I'll also second all the benefits to the project. And so we'll continue to keep everybody updated as we go through the process. And just appreciate you giving us this kind of first look. And it's exciting. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, I would take a motion to adjourn the city council study session. Councilman Jensen.
I will put that motion.
Councilman Sukram.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, the city council study session is adjourned. Before we begin the city council regular meeting, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll go ahead and open up the regular city council meeting and call it to order. The time is 7:06. The Open Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. So at this time, we'll have a roll call for the city council regular meeting.
Please vote for roll call. 8 council members.
Okay, for my comments today, I would like to honor and recognize two individuals in our community that we lost last week. Former council members Michael Coons and Vern Gibson. Council member Mike Coons was extremely involved in our community, served on the rural fire department for 30 plus years, and also on the city council, and was just a very valued member of our community and a great leader, and he will be missed. And we also lost council member Vern Gibson, who also again served on the city council and was involved in just a variety of organizations in Fremont, and including helping start the Fremont Avenue of Flags, as well as Veterans Park, and was part of Kiwanis and so many other organizations throughout the community. And so definitely was a hard week and a sad week. And both of those individuals and their service to Fremont, they will be missed. And again, on behalf of myself and on the whole city, our condolences to their families. And we again just appreciate their service to Fremont over the years. So that concludes my comments, and we'll go on to item 1 on the agenda, which is a motion to adopt the current agenda for the August 13th, 2024 regular meeting. Councilwoman Ganem.
Move to adopt the current agenda for August 13th, 2024 regular meeting.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to appointments is item 2, a move to consent to the mayor's appointments of Lindy Januowitz, Molly Payton, Laney Paquette, Keaton Krackemeyer, Brenda Wilberding, and Sam Heineman to the new terms on the Creative Council ending August 13th, 2026. We have our new creative district that has been started within the city. And so this is to appoint these individuals to the newly formed Creative Council. And I would, again, entertain a motion to approve these individuals and appreciate their service to Fremont. Councilman Horner.
I'd make a motion to approve the slate of individuals as stated.
Councilman Sukram.
I will second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 3 is resolution 2024-197 designating Troy Shaben as a street superintendent for the calendar year 2024 for the state of Nebraska street maintenance incentive payments. So this is again to appoint Troy Shaben to our street superintendent as per the state of Nebraska. So Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2024-197.
Councilman Vaughn,
I will second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to public hearings is item 4, ordinance 5681 for a change of zone from R rural to SR suburban residential for property located at the extension of Heatherwood Drive between Peterson Avenue and Brentwood Drive. Now we'll have any staff report. It's here. We have a staff member for a report.
We're expecting Jennifer Dam.
Okay, here she is. Right on time.
I apologize, I was detained in the hallway. Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request for a change of zone from R to suburban residential. It is for the entire donut hole. We'd had an initial hearing on this previously for just the area of the final plat. And the developer agreed to annex the entire donut hole. So, and change the zone on it. So we took it back to Planning Commission and now it's back to City Council. So the change of zone and the annexation, which is associated with this, are for the entire area. And then the final plat is just for a portion of that. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the City Council? Seeing any, so I'll now open the public hearing. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion. This would be to introduce and hold first reading of the change of zone. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make the motion on ordinance 5681 and hold first reading.
Councilman Horner.
I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending ordinance number 5427 as it pertains to the zoning map to rezone the property located in the southwest quarter of section 18, township 17 north, range 9, east of the 6 p.m. Dodge County, Nebraska, and generally located at the extension of Heatherwood Drive between Peterson Avenue and Brentwood Drive, Dodge County, Nebraska, from R rural to SR suburban residential, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is ordinance 5682 for the annexation of property located at the extension of Heatherwood Drive between Peterson Avenue and Brentwood Drive. I believe we had kind of the report on this.
Yes, again, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is the annexation of that entire parcel of property. This will make it much easier in the future when subsequent plats are filed. They don't have to go through the whole 3 readings for the annexation or change the zoning. Be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff on the annexation? Okay. I'll now open the public hearing of ordinance 5682. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion to introduce and hold first reading. Councilwoman Ganem.
Move that we introduce and hold the first reading for ordinance 5682.
Councilman Sukram. Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, annexing by voluntary petition property located in the southwest quarter of section 18, township 17, north, range 9, east of the 6 p.m., Dodge County, Nebraska, and generally located at the extension of Heatherwood Drive between Peterson Avenue and Brentwood Drive and westward to 12th Street, extending the corporate limits to include said real estate, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
All right, we'll move on to item 6 is resolution 2024-158 approving Brooks Hollow 3rd edition final plat consisting of 17 lots associated with a request for annexation and a change of zone of property located at the extension Heatherwood Drive between Peterson Avenue and Brentwood Drive. Staff report on this.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This request is for 17 residential lots. It's associated with the 2 previous applications and a subdivision agreement that follows this request. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions being that the subdivision agreement, annexation, and change of zone are all approved so that they're all tied together. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? Councilman Jensen.
Do those conditions need an amendment or can they just go as is?
Okay, good to go. Okay, thank you. I'll now open the public hearing on the final plat. Okay, seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any additional comments from council? If not, I'd take a motion on this item. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2024-158.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now, item 7 is a resolution 2024-159 approving the subdivision agreement consisting of 17 lots associated with a request for annexation and a change of zone for property located at the extension of Heatherwood Drive between Peterson Avenue and Brentwood Drive. And staff report on this item, on the subdivision agreement.
All right. Travis Jacott, City Attorney. This feels a little weird using a microphone like this, but I'll make it work. There is one change I'd ask. This is a subdivision agreement for the development that Jennifer went through. There is one change for something that was inadvertently left in there from a previous subdivision agreement on page 7. At the top, there's a line that shouldn't apply. That paragraph 13, developer shall construct at developer's expense sidewalks along South Howard Street. That doesn't apply to this subdivision. So we'll just, I'd ask the council to approve this with eliminating that provision.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions for staff about that or anything on the subdivision agreement? Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, Travis, as you were stating that, you blurred out just a little bit. Would you mind restating that again?
Yes, I'd ask that the council amend the subdivision agreement to eliminate that paragraph 13 on page 7. That mentions the construction of sidewalks along South Howard Street.
Councilman Horner. Okay, you're fine. Okay. Any other questions? Councilman Vaughn.
I'm gonna ask the dumb question, why?
That one doesn't apply to this subdivision.
Can you extrapolate further?
Yeah, that's not a part of the subdivision itself.
Fair enough.
Right.
Simple, easy, thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions for legal? Okay. I'll now open the public hearing on the subdivision agreement. Okay. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any additional comments from staff? Seeing none, I would just take a motion to approve the subdivision agreement with the changes suggested by legal. Councilman Jensen.
Do we need to make the amendment first and then vote on it? I'll make that motion.
Okay, Councilman Horner.
I'll second.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 8, which is ordinance 5688 for the annexation of property located at 2420 East 23rd Street. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is a request to annex property that is part of the Sid Dillon Cadillac property. It's an L-shaped piece of property. And for some reason, at the time the change of zone for that area was approved, the upper left L, the piece of property that's actually right behind Rough House, wasn't annexed. And it's should be part of the city. It's part of the property. It's properly zoned, it's contiguous. The developer or owner is willing to have it annexed and staff recommends approval.
Any questions for staff on this item? Yes, Councilman Horner.
About how long has it existed as is without, or with this mistake in the zoning?
Well, for at least 7 years, if I'm sure quite a bit longer than that. I can't tell you. A long time.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead and open up the public hearing on this item. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council on this? This would be to introduce and hold first reading. I would take a motion if there's no other comments. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make the motion on ordinance 5688.
Okay.
Hold first reading.
Councilwoman Ganem.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, annexing by voluntary petition property composed of a parcel of land located in the southeast quarter of section 12, being parts of lot D and E of Howard Williams et al. Subdivision of the south half southeast quarter of section 12 and the north half northeast quarter section 13, all in township 17 north range 8 east of the 6 p.m. Dodge County, Nebraska, extending the corporate limits to include said real estate, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on.
Mayor,
Yes.
is there any reason that we can't suspend rules and move this one on to third reading? Third and final?
Normally this is an annexation, so it does just has to go to 3 readings. Yeah, there's certain ordinances that just require 3 readings. So, yep. Okay, we'll go ahead and move to item 9, which is ordinance 5691, amending section 11-615.02 fences and walls. And there is a request to suspend the rules on this one to place on final reading. So go ahead.
Good evening again. This is a request that came forward from 2 council members. A constituent had asked that an 8-foot fence be required between commercial and residential properties. Currently, it's limited to a 6-foot fence. We had a lot of really good discussion about this at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission added some additional language that would allow a waiver of that 8-foot requirement to occur if it could be determined that there would be no negative impact from a 6-foot fence instead of an 8-foot fence. There certainly could be circumstances where a 6-foot fence would be appropriate, would screen the neighbors, and would be a lesser expense than on the business. That was the rationale for that. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Is that language included in the ordinance?
It is included in the ordinance.
Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. The to be determined, who determines that? Who gets to decide?
I think we wrote the waiver so that the Planning Commission could grant that waiver if it could be shown that there was not a negative impact on the neighborhood. Yeah, it says the planning commission may grant a waiver to reduce the height of a required privacy fence to 6 feet if it can be demonstrated that there is no adverse impact to an abutting residential property.
Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, just a little background, and I think Councilman Vaughn was also involved in this one. This came from a constituent, and they actually are behind Walgreens. When they built, my understanding is that Walgreens said, yes, we're gonna raise our property, but to compensate and give you privacy, we'll give you an 8-foot fence. And so the businesses did. But when the business just to the west of Walgreens went to replace their fence, they came to the city, and obviously our ordinance said 6 feet. So they made it 6 feet. And if you stand in the living room of the individual who had the concern, you can look out, and you can look directly into the car lights, and it's not intrusive, but it's way too much visibility. And all this really does is allow them to return to their original agreement with the 8-foot fences that'll protect their privacy.
Councilman Vaughn.
I appreciate the expediency with which we moved on this to get this changed because yeah, I was there and it is kind of intrusive.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the council on this item? Right, I'll now open the public hearing. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any comments, additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion. This would be first to have first reading on this. Councilman Von Baron.
Yes, I'd move to hold first reading on ordinance 5691.
Councilman Vaughn.
I will second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, Zoning Subdivision and Site Development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
There is a request to suspend the rules on this item. Councilman Vaughn.
I will make that motion.
Councilman Von Baron.
I'll second it.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, Zoning Subdivision and Site Development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on final reading.
Cast your final vote. This is ordinance 5691, amending section 11-61502 for fences and walls.
Ordinance is approved 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 10, it's ordinance 5692, amending section 11-616 for height and area exceptions. There is a request to suspend rules and place on final reading. Go ahead.
This request came about as the school district is moving the high school football field from Heatham Field to the high school. They're installing new bleachers. And as we were reviewing the building permit, the press box is 48 feet tall. The maximum height for that district is 36 feet. We've looked at the area, the location of the press box and the bleachers are against the school. It's a very large area, so it works for scale. The neighbors aren't going to be looking at the back of the bleachers or the back of the press box. So we decided that it was appropriate to move forward with this exception to allow it to be 12 feet taller. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? See, Councilman Vaughn.
So I do have one. Are we allowing this one time thing to happen, or are we amending that it could happen multiple times?
It could happen the way it's written is that it's press boxes on the top of bleachers that are associated with educational or public athletic fields. So if they rebuilt the fields the bleachers at Heatham Field, that could be a possibility there as well. But it is constrained to educational and public facilities.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on this item. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any additional comments from council on this item? Okay, if there are none, I would take a motion. This would be to introduce and hold first reading. Councilman Vaughn.
So moved.
Councilwoman Ganem. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
I'll have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, zoning, subdivision, and site development. Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
Okay, there is a request to suspend rules and move to final reading. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to suspend the rules and move ordinance 5692 into the third and final reading.
Councilman Vaughn.
I will second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, zoning, subdivision, and site development. Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on final reading.
Cast your final vote for ordinance 5692.
The ordinance is approved 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda, all items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from council or staff from the consent agenda? Are there any items from the public to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Councilman Von Baron.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to unfinished business. This is item 22, ordinance 5683 to annex property generally located southeast of Hills Farm Road at the BNSF Railroad associated with a request for the Hills Farm addition final plat. This would be final reading of this item.
Good evening. This is the third and final reading for the annexation for the area that's specifically associated with the first phase of the Hills Farm Lake development. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Any additional comments from the public on this? Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion. This would be for final reading of ordinance 5683. Councilman Horner.
I'll make a motion for final reading for ordinance 5683.
Councilman Von Baron.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have final reading.
Ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, annexing by voluntary petition property composed of a portion of tax lot 59 in the southwest quarter of section 25 and composed of a portion of tax lot 56 and a portion of tax lot 57 in the southeast quarter of section 26 and composed of a portion of tax lot 1 and a portion of tax lot 2 in the northeast quarter of section 35 and composed of a portion of tax lot 3 and a portion of tax lot 18 in the northwest quarter of section 36, all located in township 17 North Range 8 east of the 6 p.m. Dodge County, Nebraska, and generally located southeast of Hills Farm Road and the BNSF, extending the corporate limits to include said real estate, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on final reading.
Cast your final vote for ordinance 5683.
Ordinance is approved 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to new business, item 23 is ordinance 5689 for the approval of the utility salary ordinance. I'll have staff report.
Good evening, Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This would be the salary ordinance for the utility side of the organization. Would be effective for the payroll that includes October 1st. The IBEW contract provides for a 3% cost of living increase for effective that payroll, and staff is recommending a 3% increase, the same for non-union staff. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff on this item? Anybody here to speak on this item? Okay, any additional comments from council? If there are not, take a motion to hold first reading of ordinance 5689. Councilman Vaughn.
So moved.
Councilman Jensen.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5671 and all of the parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on first reading.
Okay, moving on to item 24 is ordinance 5690 for the approval of the government salary ordinance. And this would be for first reading. I'll have staff report.
Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This is a salary ordinance for the other half, for the city side. FOP, IAFF, and AFSCME contracts again provide for 3% increase effective for the payroll that includes October 1st. Staff is again recommending 3%, the same for non-union. Happy to take questions.
Any questions from the council? Thank you. Councilman Vaughn, actually.
Maybe not a question for you specifically, but more for the audience and the group. We have members like ourselves and the mayor whose rate has been static for some time, and nobody wants to be the person that brings up, well, maybe they should be paid more. The county board found a way to make this more palatable in years past, that this body, these folks sitting up here would get the same COLA, cost of living increase. What is it, 3%? That's not much on $500, but over time, you would gradually build up the pay of those positions. I would like to offer the amendment to that resolution if I could get the support in a second.
Thing about amending elected officials' salaries is it can't take effect until the next term of, so I think the amendment would be.
To bring another ordinance in.
Yeah, I think we could either handle that at maybe another reading or bring it back as a separate item. It's up to you how you want to handle it.
Leave it for a secondary reading or further down the line.
Councilman Jensen.
Yes, Councilman Vaughn, I was just going to tell you that we've been working on this. I've been talking with some of the staff and we're looking at doing something like that, but that will be something separate and we can converse about this at another time.
Okay, is there anybody here to speak on this item? Okay, coming back to the city council, any additional comments? This would be to hold first reading. Councilman Jensen.
I will need to, as my daughter just recently accepted a position, they'll be falling underneath this salary ordinance. I'm going to need to abstain on this vote.
Councilman Vaughn.
Make no motion to approve and hold first reading.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carried 7-0 with one abstention, Mayor.
Okay, we'll have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5672 and all of the ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on final reading, on first reading.
Go ahead and move on to item 25 is resolution 2024-194, renewing the city's property and liability policy for a 1-year policy period. This time we'll have staff report from our finance director.
Jennifer Knapp, Finance Director, Mr. Mayor and City Council. This is our 1-year renewal with a 3-year commitment for LARM, who is our insurance carrier. It would take effect October 1st. This is a pretty large bump, but not unexpected. Part of it is because insurance rates are going up, and part of it is because we've added some items to it, like 13 vehicles as an example. However, it is an excellent policy, and I wanted to just offer up a real world example. We had storms in May, and we have a $10,000 deductible for hail. We had 78 structures that were affected, and our deductible that we paid is $10,000. The damage was millions of dollars, and we will pay $10,000. We've got neighboring cities who are with a competing insurance company, and they have taken theirs to $25,000 per building. If we had been under that policy, we would be paying $1.9 million. So while we do have an increase here, it is a very good policy, and they've been great to work with. And I recommend, and staff recommends that you approve us renewing with LARM. And I'm here for any questions.
Councilman Von Baron.
Jennifer, do you have any, I'm just looking at the staff report. Do you have any background on why in 2020, obviously before you were here, we were looking at going away from LARM and going to an independent?
I can't speak to what happened then, but I'm always looking. I'm always evaluating and taking a look at what is the latest, what changes have been made. And every couple of years, at the very least, we will always be looking at what's going on in the market. So I can't speak to what happened in 2000, but every year when we renew, we'll be looking around just like we did this time when we found out some of the changes in the competing insurance companies.
Yeah, it just seemed unusual enough that I thought it was worth noting that there was a ripple in the water of some kind. Maybe it's just a question.
Jody Sanders, City Administrator. I believe at the time we had been with LARM for an extended period of time and had not gone out to seek other coverage. And so when it was approved in 2019, it was with the proviso that we would go out and solicit bids for 2020. It was just kind of a housekeeping item that we hadn't been doing that. Council asked us to do that in 2019. So when 2020 came, we did it.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council or comments? Anybody here to speak on this item? Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make the motion on a resolution 2024-194.
Councilwoman Ganem.
And
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 26 is resolution 2024-192, authorizing the relocation of a pedestrian traffic signal from approximately 19th and Claremore Avenue to 19th and Luther Road. We'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, acting city engineer. This item is to propose moving the traffic signal, like the mayor said, from 19th and Claremore to 19th and Luther. With the closing of Claremore School, that pedestrian signal is not as necessary. If you remember, maybe 8 or 10 months ago, we came in with a proposal to move that pedestrian signal to
Jack Sutton Drive just south of Sunridge. That plan was changed to a sidewalk on the north side of Jack Sutton to get the kids to the middle school easier. With the opening of the new elementary school on 23rd and Luther, we've been looking at the area, as I'm sure you all have heard. We put a four-way stop in on 22nd and Luther. That stop was actually called out in the traffic study. The original path to get children from the east, or from the west, I'm sorry, across Luther Road was to come down 19th or 16th, and then on the west side of the road, there's a sidewalk, walk up to 22nd at the four-way stop and come across. We had some comments from citizens about the trail that's on 19th and Luther. When that trail was designed and put in, the school was not there, so at the time there was not a pedestrian signal put in. But now that the school's there, we actually went out. I sat at 19th Street and watched cars go by on 19th and Luther, and the distance between 23rd and 16th is enough that there are some cars that get up to speed through there. And with all the kids walking to school, to the new school, I'm certain some of those children are just going to see the path, cross Luther Road, and try to cross there. And with the increase in traffic for the school, in my opinion, it creates an unsafe situation. It would just be better to give a crossing signal there for them to cross. Like I said, it is not in the traffic study. It is not in the trail study. This is something that myself and the other people in Public Works have looked at and thought would be a good idea. It's simply for safety. So we're asking to do that. I can answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Councilman Jensen.
This signal there, that will be exclusively exclusively pedestrian operated, correct? I mean, it will
Push
be,
button.
yeah, push button, and that's it.
It will not change unless the button is pushed, correct?
Councilwoman Lathrop.
Are there some specific regulations about how far that needs to be back from an intersection? Because I know on Claremore, it's not right next to an intersection, whereas on Luther, it appears as though it's right next to an intersection. And is there some concern about the people taking a right onto Luther from 19th?
There's not a set distance for that. It's analyzed based on traffic flow. It was not looked at in the traffic study, honestly, but the traffic study doesn't include any pedestrian crossings in there. The answer is no, the distance isn't required, but we think it's still a safety issue there. So.
Councilman Vaughn.
The sentiment I hear around town is that the four-way stop that's now active up the road is going to be a detriment, although we won't find out till Monday or Tuesday next week how that's going to all shake out. Do you think that possibly we could be better served with a fully functional traffic lighting signal at that 19th and Luther area in lieu of the stop signs?
You mean at 22nd in lieu of the four-way stop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would that potentially be able to eliminate that four-way stop or modify it to just being a stop for, Luther could keep going kind of thing?
They'll act very similarly. I'm not traffic engineering is not my specialty. I know enough to be dangerous. They'll act very, very similarly. What it does is the traffic signal, you'd have to change the signalization during school and not during school. And really what you have now is traffic backing up with a stop sign. If you were to put a red light there, you would time it that it would function about the same, that the traffic coming through would be the same as would a stop sign. The one thing you don't have is you can't change the signalization of a stop sign. So they would act very similarly. It would probably be it would be a benefit. I can't say it would be a big enough benefit that it would prevent traffic issues in that area. I'm going to stand here and guarantee to everybody in the room, don't go anywhere near that intersection on Monday morning. And it's not a function of the traffic signalization. It's a function of every day at every school in the country. On the first day of school, you have new students, you have new parents. Everybody's trying to relearn the way they get into the school. That intersection is going to be horrible on Monday morning. So please don't it's not the end of the world on Monday morning. Let's wait a couple weeks and see how it goes and give everybody a chance to get in there and get around. But if that in fact, and again, I'm not a traffic engineer, not my traffic study that called it out, but the four-way stop was called out in the traffic study. If further analysis is needed, then we could look at something like that.
Thank you for your dedication.
Councilman Horner.
Troy, thanks for bringing this forward. Looking back at 19th and Luther, when you put wherever, I understand what Lori's concern is, and whenever you end up figuring out where to put the actual device, I'm assuming that there would be maybe some painting or repainting of some markings on the street as to where to stop.
So there's a crosswalk there right now.
There's a crosswalk there already.
And the idea would also be to put in like a flashing or a flagged light before you get to it. That's they're usually 50 or 100 feet prior to the
Okay,
intersection.
all right,
And
that's what I was going to get
it's
at.
kind of like a flashing warning, and those would only be in the mornings and in the afternoons when, 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after school.
Well, because of the way it's offset from 19th, because if I remember right, it's
on the
the
south
actual
side.
crossing is on the south side of 19th, right?
Correct.
So maybe having people coming southbound when that light was triggered, stopping before you got to 19th might be a fairly safe way to do that. I don't know.
So the way it's designed now is it's all that the light is only on the Luther, so only the people coming north and south on Luther are going to get the light. We could put up another light that would hang off of that pole and would physically give the people on 19th Street a red light too when that light's depressed. That wouldn't be that difficult to add that, but right now what we're putting up is a north-south only traffic signalization device. We could very easily put another light off that would hang, off to the east side of Luther facing 19th Street. And that would be like a red light for the people on 19th so that they couldn't, come up to Luther and do a rolling stop and pull through when a child's in the intersection.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, I won't be redundant, but as you know, the traffic safety across Luther has been a concern for some time, even among the parents with Trinity and the student crossings and some of the speed limits on Luther, and that's been ongoing. It'll be interesting to see now that we will have 4 potential stops between 16th and 23rd. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds, but certainly appreciate your paying attention to that, Troy. You responded very quickly and we are very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Appreciate it. Anybody here to speak on this item?
Brad Yerger, 2318 East Fifth Street. I'd like to commend the council for a lot of questions that were asked tonight and concern for public safety. And I've been up here, I've been where you've sitting, and I've been on this side of the podium advocating the same with regards to student safety. But I do have to get up and say a couple other things. I'm not necessarily giving any opposition to moving the pedestrian traffic signal down to Luther from the current location. That probably does make some sense. My experience has been that those traffic signals aren't necessarily the safest things in the world either, as I have watched people blow through those down on First Street. Even though they're functional, people don't always adhere to them. So I think that will be a challenge for the city to monitor. But as I looked at what was going on currently and what we didn't do as a city as part of getting the school built out there, I am deeply concerned that now the city is potentially going to stop traffic at 16th Street, 19th Street, 22nd Street, and 23rd Street along a major collector street that moved traffic north and south on the east part of Fremont. I realized the school is there. We built the trail on the east side of the road, not the west side, as was articulated by Troy. Probably would have been smarter for us to do it and bring that up to 22nd Street if that's where you need a light.
Or some of us suggested that that street should have never exited on 22nd Street in the first place. It should have been brought further south to come out of the school district closer to 19th, where that could have been managed with a further distance from 23rd. I recall the traffic engineer that did the studies on 23rd Street say they wouldn't put traffic lights between Luther and what is it, Elk Lane or whatever, across from Walmart, so that school buses and parents could travel across 4 lanes of traffic safety. They wouldn't recommend putting one there, and the city is not. But now we're going to put on Luther stops on 16th, 19th, 22nd, and 23rd. I fully expect that to be a nightmare when the school opens. Unfortunately, I also predict that's going to be a nightmare when you tear that intersection out and widen Luther Street, because we didn't do it now, before school opened now. So that even with all of these apparatus and controls, you don't have any place for traffic to get into a turning lane versus those that want to go straight north. To me, that's just poor planning. I know I personally stood on this side of the podium advocating for relief of all of that. I wish we had done it. I think history will prove that the safety is not going to be resolved quickly with 4 stops along Luther. It's not going to be resolved by no stoplight on 23rd Street exiting the school either. And in the end, the city will have to resolve all that when they put turning lanes in between 16th and 23rd and stoplights in those locations on 23rd to safely move the buses and parent traffic out of that. I just wish that we had done that systematically at the time that we planned and developed the school, so that we would be better prepared, because this will be a nightmare as this gets resolved in the future when construction is done all over again. Thank you.
Anybody else here to speak on this item? Okay. Any additional comments from council on this item? Councilwoman Lathrop.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that when Fremont Middle School opened, that my son was in the first 6th grade class out there. I do understand traffic nightmares. The very first day of school, traffic was backed up from the middle school all the way back to where Nifty 50s was. So yes, change is hard. People just need to pack their patience when taking kids to school, and just be careful and patient and careful, and you can make it work. Yes, there were traffic studies done, but how you can't really change something when you don't know the actual statistics of the traffic flow there. So just a little patience, and just know that the council, the city, everybody is looking at it, and it will be taken care of and tended to.
Councilwoman Ganem.
No, I guess I will echo that. She already said pretty much a lot. What I would say, we weren't involved in the selection of the school where it would go, and not at the very beginning. It was after the decisions were made. And I believe this school had said 2025 is when it would be open. So we're lucky that they can open it earlier, and we're not lucky at the same time because we're not at a point where we could complete things. And it is very difficult to project future traffic, what it will be like until it actually happens, just like our junior high. And they certainly were able to resolve that much easier than after it had happened. So patience is a virtue.
And I will say, it made it a priority here before these new schools open. We also have 3 new elementary schools, on the same site, but different traffic patterns, as well as this is obviously with school starting, there's other challenges too. So we did had a meeting, the city administrator, our Chief Elliott, as well as the school administration, to kind of prepare for this day, to have kind of a coordinated effort and presence. So we are working on it. We are keeping the safety of the students and the public at the forefront. And again, I think, ask for your patience and we'll get through this. We'll have a good start to the school year. So take any other comments at this point. Councilman Vaughn.
I got one more, I suppose, because can't let this lie without being said. We're talking about for one elementary school, special student crossing provision, but you work your way down Luther Road. Is there anything near or adjacent to Military or First and Luther going to the Johnson Crossing or the middle school? And there's an awful lot of kids crossing those streets in that area. And there always has been. And what does this one new single elementary school, how does it take precedent over the other schools that have been dealing with this and kids playing Frogger in traffic for some time, as opposed to this one new elementary school that we don't know how it's going to be impacting?
First, I understand comparing it to the middle school, and then that's the basis everybody has to go by, because that's the most recent school we had, and we all know about the traffic issues out there, and everybody thinks it's going to be the same. There are stops on Luther, but the two schools out east, there's 1,400 kids there. There's 280 at this school. These are not middle schoolers that are gonna, that are older. These are kindergarten to fourth graders, and looking at this particular one versus First and Luther, they can cross Luther and there's a sidewalk on both sides of the road. And so they don't have to jump back and forth. The concern here is if you walk down that trail on 19th, that meandering trail, and that's the big wide trail, and that's the safest one I would feel if I was a parent. That kid gets to Luther, if a first grader is, I hate to say is going to get confused, but just looking at it, I'm admitting we're erring on the side of safety. I don't have any data to say that this is needed here or anything like that. This is a safety thing. And I'm just relying on experience and trying to find out what do we think is going to be the safest way to get those little kids across. So, the other elementary schools, I can't comment on that. They seem to have their patterns down, but this is a unique situation where you have a Luther Road in the morning is going to be very, very busy. Like everybody says, it's the main arterial going north and south on that side of the town. It's a potentially dangerous situation in my opinion, and that's why we're here asking for you to approve it. If that's not what we want to do, then we'll figure something else out.
Councilman Jensen.
I have support for your plan. I live on Military. I have a pedestrian crossing less than 2 blocks from my house that kids use all the time. And especially Military, they've got they have the swimming pool down there, the park over there, the Linden School over there. It gets used a lot, and the traffic does pay attention to it. They stop. Yes, people are going to have to learn. There's going to be some bugs at first, but they'll get worked out.
There's definitely a learning curve, and if people are blowing through that intersection, we'll work with the police department on enforcement. There's a lot of things we can do. Like I said, I'm going to guarantee Monday morning, that's going to be the worst. That's going to be the worst place to be in Fremont. It's probably going to be the front page story in the newspaper about how dumb I am. I don't know. It's just the way it is. It's going to be bad because I had 2 kids in elementary school in that first week, didn't want to be anywhere near them, but it's more of a function of the new school and the new traffic patterns than it is of the traffic stops and the signals and everything like that. And hopefully everybody will learn and we'll get along, but certainly, we're going to monitor it. That's for certain.
Councilman Horner.
Thank you, Mayor. Troy, again, I appreciate you being proactive on this and trying to get ahead of it. I'm going to echo a little bit of what Councilman Jensen just said. I also, on Nye, right at Linden, there's a one of these pedestrian activated crossings. I wish it was actually a little closer to Linden. I do see some little kids that come down. They don't want to do the few steps north there on Nye to get to the safe walk, and they just make a dash across Nye, but that is what it is. But people see them, they stop, I think those traffic control devices do work. I personally have never seen anybody blow by one of those. That would terrify me if I did. But my question, I guess, would be, once we get this approved tonight, how long is it going to be before that is in place?
There's some preliminary electrical work we have to do because we have to put it on the east side because there are overhead power lines there. I would guess they would probably get started on it within 3 or 4 weeks and it could be done in 6.
Councilman Vaughn.
If no other comments, I want to say I appreciate Troy and I make a motion to approve.
Councilman Sukram.
I will second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you.
Item 27 is a resolution 2024-193 awarding bid to Astro Buildings for the contract of a Quonset at Christensen Field. We'll have a report from Nick Hansen.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. Nick Hansen, Parks and Rec Director. This Quonset would actually, we have a lease right now out there at Summers. This one would actually be built by the city, put at Christensen Field. It's about 100 by 45 by 16-foot garage doors. It's basically a pole barn or a Quonset. I'll take questions.
Questions for our staff? Councilman Vaughn.
What goes in it?
It'd be all of our park equipment, a lot of our winter stuff that goes in there, and then our summer stuff that goes in there for the winter, vice versa. And then a lot of our Christensen Field 4-H stuff, John C. Fremont Day stuff, park stuff.
Councilman Horner.
If I understood right, you said you're currently leasing the building you're in now. So there'll be a little bit of a lease offset once you get this one built. And can you tell me how much that lease is?
Yeah, the lease currently now is 4,500, and it can increase to whatever they want to put every year. But right now it's 4,500.
Okay.
We could have built 2 of them.
Okay, but there's at least some offset.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. Anybody here to speak on this item? Okay. Any additional comments from council on this? If not, I take a motion to award the bid to Astro Buildings for the Quonset building. Councilman Horner.
I'll make a motion on resolution 2024-193 awarding Astro Buildings contract for a Quonset at Christensen Field.
Councilman Sukram.
I will second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, item 28 is an executive session to discuss threatened litigation, contract negotiations, and employment matters. So Councilman Jensen.
I move to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing threatened litigation, contract negotiation, and employment matters, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest.
Councilwoman Ganem.
I second the motion.
A motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing threatened litigation, contract negotiations, and employment matters, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Is there any discussion? Pending motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing threatened litigation, contract negotiations, and employment matters, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Please cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
A motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing threatened litigation, contract negotiations, and employment matters, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest has been approved. Discussion will be limited to threatened litigation, contract negotiations, and employment matters. No official actions or votes will be taken during the executive session, and we'll now move back to the back conference room.
Well, he's not.
You all right, Mark?
Hey, Councilman Vaughn, take a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Councilman Jensen.
I will second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to adjourn, Councilman Vaughn.
So moved.
Councilman Jensen.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.
Time me down.